At 3:09 a.m. on October 6, 2025, the Kamchatka Peninsula slept under a sky so still and hauntingly quiet it could have been painted. But one thing was moving, a Ukrainian LEA-100 drone, gliding 4,000 feet above the frozen coast. Its mission was routine surveillance, or so the worldly outside world believed at the time. Then one thermal pulse appeared on screen, then another. Two Mi-24 Hind gunships, still hot from landing. Moments later, the drone's feed brightened. Fuel trucks idled, generators hummed, radar dishes rotated lazily toward the Pacific. It wasn't a random outpost. It was a fully active Russian logistics base, pulsing with life and loaded with over 1 million pounds of aviation fuel. Every drop of it fed Moscow's eastern operations. The discovery was staggering. A single strike here could choke off Russia's Pacific air routes for weeks. Inside Ukraine's underground command center, the analysts went silent. Coordinates matched, movement patterns confirmed, thermal imagery verified. What they were seeing wasn't luck. It was a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Codenamed Operation Silent Vortex, the plan was simple: trick, blind, and burn. 2 decoy drones would bait the radar, while 4 stealth FP strike UAVs swept through the blind corridor. The difference between success and disaster would come down to seconds. If the radar picked them up, the mission was over. If it didn't, Kamchatka's entire defense grid could collapse before sunrise. The order came through one line only: Vortex live. The drone's camera steadied over the tundra. From above, the base looked peaceful, but peace was about to end in fire. By 3:20 a.m., the plan moved from maps to motion. In Zaporizhia, analysts cross-checked satellite passes, weather windows, and electromagnetic readings. They had rehearsed this ballet for 6 weeks, plotting radar footprints and false returns until every Russian response had a counter. The decoys were simple and obvious. 2 Bayraktar TB2s would climb high, broadcast clear signatures, and scream across scopes like an approaching assault. Those decoys would force Nebo-M arrays to react. On the frozen steppe, the Russian crews stayed careless. Crews refueled, pilots checked systems, radios traded jokes. Radar operators relaxed when large contacts filled their scopes. Nebo-M switched modes to track. Panzer SM batteries heated launch rails. Defenders believed a routine protocol would stop the threat. That is where cunning finds its edge. While Russia burned interceptors on the decoys, 4 FP-1 strike UAVs waited low and silent below the radar horizon. Their guidance was inertial, their timing surgical. No transponders, no emissions to betray them. The entire attack depended on one mechanical truth: radars consume time and energy when they lock. Create the illusion of mass attack, and you force the defender to reveal his hand. In Zaporizhia, a single encrypted message confirmed timing. Decoys in, gap open in 90 seconds. The room inhaled and held. Outside, the night seemed unchanged. Inside that hush, engineers checked warheads, pilots aligned inertial nodes, and a tiny clock began its final countdown. If they failed, Russian air operations across the Pacific corridor would recover within hours and the opportunity would vanish, possibly for months. No chance. At 3:30 a.m., the Kamchatka night became an illusion. Russian radar screens at Yellow Zoo lit up with ghost signatures from 2 Bayraktar TB, 2 decoys climbing through the mist. Their signals were bright, confident, and deliberate. Inside the Russian control cabin, operators shouted coordinates and activated full-power scan mode. The Nebo-M radar spun faster, its electronic beams sweeping for invisible enemies. Then the first volley came. 6 interceptor missiles arced skyward. 30 autocannon shells followed. On their monitors, the decoys vanished in a burst of static. Russian crews cheered, convinced the danger had passed. They didn't realize the real attack had already begun, 500 feet above the tundra, silent, invisible, and deadly. 4 FP-1 strike UAVs glided forward beneath the radar curtain, riding low thermals off the Pacific coast. Each one carried a 165-pound shape-charged warhead designed to cut through steel like paper. No transponders, no radio chatter, no GPS. Just inertial guidance and perfect timing. In the command bunker at Zaporizhzhia, The feeds showed 4 small white vectors crawling across the grid. 3 minutes to impact, whispered an operator. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The world was about to learn how silence could kill. At 3:33 a.m., the first FP-1 slammed into the Mi-24 helicopter cluster. The explosion painted the night orange, scattering debris over 400 feet. The second FP-1 tore through the Nebo-M radar dish, collapsing its 45-foot frame and vaporizing the control trailer. Seconds later, the last 2 drones pierced the fuel silos and B-12 patrol planes. Fire rolled across the tarmac, turning the frozen airfield into a molten storm. Ground crews screamed. Ammunition bunkers detonated one after another. The base's communication lines flickered, then went dark. In less than 4 minutes, Russia's eastern lifeline was gone. All right, quick pause. If you're following this strike minute by minute and learning how modern warfare truly unfolds, make sure to hit subscribe and tap that like button. Every week we bring you verified battlefield analyses that major networks overlook. Now, let's see what daylight revealed over Kamchatka. By 3:36 a.m., Kamchatka wasn't a base anymore. It was an inferno. The first satellite pass from Maxar caught a bloom of heat so large it confused the sensors, and 1,100-foot circle of fire visible from orbit. Within seconds, the blaze leapt higher than a 10-story building. Jet fuel burned in blue arcs. Shattered hangars glowed white-hot, bending under their own heat. Inside the perimeter, chaos replaced discipline. Men screamed for extinguishers that no longer existed. Trucks overturned, storage tanks collapsed, and the once rigid command structure fell apart as each explosion drowned the next. The shockwave had killed power lines, communications, and most of the command crew in the radar sector. For 3 full minutes, no one in the Pacific Command knew what had happened. In Zaporizhzhia, Ukrainian analysts watched in silence as 4 bright dots on their screens went dark. Confirmation signals returned. Each drone had met its target. "Impact verified," said the voice on the line. No applause, no cheers, just the click of keyboards and the hum of servers recording history. 40 miles away, fishermen at Avacha Bay mistook the blast for a volcanic flare. They had lived near volcanoes all their lives, but this looked different. The horizon flickered orange and white, reflecting off the Black Sea. Even from their boats, they could feel the heat. By 3:45 a.m., the roaring flames had joined into one massive fireball. The Nebo-M radar site was gone. The airfield was gone. The 2 Mi-24 gunships were twisted skeletons. Fuel depots ruptured, spilling rivers of burning kerosene into the snow. The temperature inside the blast zone exceeded 1,100 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt titanium. And still, Moscow had no idea what hit them. In less than 7 minutes, an operation costing less than $3 million had wiped out nearly $200 million in infrastructure. For the first time since the war began, Russia's eastern defense screen went completely silent. By 4:10 a.m., the fireball over Kamchatka could be seen from 40 miles away. Local fishermen at Avacha Bay watched in stunned silence, believing a volcano had erupted beneath the clouds. But this wasn't nature. It was precision. Every glow, every detonation followed the geometry of man-made destruction. Inside the Pacific Command Center in Petropavlovsk, alarms screamed across multiple channels. Officers scrambled to re-establish contact with the airbase. Static filled every frequency. The last recorded message from the site was just 8 words long: radar down, fuel fire, requesting evac, and then the line went dead. For over an hour, Russia's Far Eastern Defense Network flickered and failed. The destruction of the Nebo-M array had created a blind corridor stretching 90 kilometers from the peninsula's coast deep into the Sea of Okhotsk. Missiles could have flown through it undetected, and Moscow wouldn't have known. At 5 a.m., daylight began creeping over the peninsula, revealing the nightmare left behind. What had once been an orderly grid of hangars, runways, and radar towers was now a blackened field of twisted steel. The remains of 3 Mi-24 attack helicopters lay scattered like skeletal remains. The B-12 maritime patrol plane was gone, melted into an unrecognizable mound of alloy. Fuel silos still burned, sending black smoke high into the troposphere. The ground was so hot that rescue crews couldn't enter. Fire engines sank into the melting tarmac. Those who survived the initial blast wandered in shock, faces pale from burns and disbelief. One officer stood amid the flames, clutching a melted headset, murmuring that the sky had simply gone quiet. By sunrise, the temperature inside the crater was still over 700 degrees Celsius. Russian state media released a brief statement at 6:15 a.m., calling it a technical malfunction at a remote facility. But Western satellites were already capturing everything: thermal patterns, blast signatures, and chemical traces. Every line of data pointed to one conclusion. This was no accident. This was Operation Silent Vortex, executed with surgical precision. In Zaporizhzhia, the command screen slowly dimmed to standby. Mission complete. For the Ukrainian operators, it wasn't triumph, only confirmation. In modern warfare, victory isn't loud. It's the quiet click of a transmission that says, "Target neutralized." When the smoke finally lifted over Kamchatka, only silence remained. The airbase that once pulsed with engines and radio chatter had turned into a crater of ash and molten steel. By mid-morning, emergency teams from Petropavlovsk tried to reach the site, but the terrain was still too hot to cross. Aviation fuel continued to burn underground, creating invisible fires that smoldered for days. The loss went far beyond infrastructure. For Moscow, it was humiliation. Kamchatka had been more than an outpost. It was proof that Russia's eastern shield could not be breached. Now, in less than 8 minutes, it had been erased. Entire squadrons were grounded, refueling routes cut, and command nodes blinded. Even more devastating was the silence from the radar grid. For nearly 5 hours, the Pacific sky over Russia's Far East was deaf. News spread quickly. Western analysts confirmed that the strike had been deliberate, data-driven, and flawless. The estimated damage exceeded $220 million, but the real cost was confidence. The myth of invulnerability had cracked. If Ukraine could reach Kamchatka, no Russian region was safe. In Kiev, the operation became legend, a case study in precision warfare. 3 decoys, 4 strike drones, and 1 perfectly timed deception had accomplished what hundreds of cruise missiles could not. Operation Silent Vortex proved that the future of war didn't belong to those who shouted loudest, but to those who thought fastest. When night returned to Kamchatka, only faint embers glowed where the radar towers once stood. The wind moved across the tundra, carrying the smell of burned fuel and frozen earth. No speeches, no victory banners, just silence. If you want to see more verified frontline analyses and hidden operations like this, subscribe now and hit the bell icon. We're tracking every shift in modern warfare, because in this age of silent warfare, every second of hesitation can decide not just battles, but entire nations.